I didn't memorize it.
Great, neither did I. This should be a really good one.
The title of our session is Fueling Growth, How Emotional Connections Drive Economic Success. I don't know, we've spoken so many times, I always forget about what our topics are. Does anybody, hands up if you don't know Danielle. There's at least 3 liars. Because there's more than 3 people. But yeah, Mark keeps meeting you at every event and he still doesn't know who you are. Why don't you introduce yourself briefly? And at the same time, why don't we just skip straight to maybe a quick, brief explanation of where people might have previously known you from how that fits in now. So, because that was going to be my first question anyway.
All right, I think I can oblige. All right, so I'm Danielle, and I'm the Chief Marketing Officer at a company called Plusgrade. And Plusgrade is an ancillary revenue company. And what we do now is combine loyalty and ancillary retailing expertise to create these really exciting experiences for travelers that drive a shit ton of revenue for our partners. And I say a shit ton because these happy ancillaries will this year drive $5 billion in revenue for our partners. So it is a lot of money. And where you may have known me from previously is as the Chief Marketing Officer at Points. So Points has been in the loyalty space for about 25 years. I've been at Points since, I guess, 2014, left for a little bit, came back. It's really lovely marriage of products that fit in the ancillary space that really make the traveler journey so much more enjoyable and accessible. And the cool part of the job is that while we use a whole bunch of data science and analytics to engage loyalty program members, and I'll just speak about the loyalty part of the business right now, what we know, even though we're focusing on this economic growth for partners, what we know is the reason that these products are so very effective in driving economic growth is because they actually build loyalty with the program.
So, I mean, hands up who's already familiar with Points.com prior to Plusgrade. Okay. Hands up who was familiar with Plusgrade before their acquisition of Points.com. Okay. All right, for those of you in brands or were previously with brands, who had business relationships with Points? Okay, and who had business relationships with Plusgrade? Okay, a couple. And that doesn't surprise me, okay? Obviously, Points is around longer. And I think everybody is familiar with the buy, gift, transfer platform. You know, whether it's via Points or some brands do it themselves or otherwise, but the concept isn't unfamiliar to most folks. So for those that perhaps a little less familiar with Plusgrade, I think the 2 sort of questions that I sort of have is, you know, obviously a buy points platform. It's pretty simple. There's a margin on top that, you know, the consumer pays, the consumer gets points, but the brand, you know, it's a revenue-rich or margin-rich ancillary channel for a brand. And, you know, the consumer, obviously, each brand, the consumer has a perception of how valuable the points are to them, but particularly if they're topping up for a big redemption, you know, it can be a big deal for a consumer if they have to buy a couple $100s worth of points and it gets them a first-class trip somewhere, you know, overseas. It's probably a pretty good value purchase. The margin of those points obviously is good for the brand. When we think about Plusgrade, obviously that's an ancillary play as well. But my question to you also is it's not just about the revenue. And I think that those brands that have had long-standing relationships understand that one of the things you guys are really good at, hopefully you'd assume so, is data. Mm-hmm. But can you give me, maybe talk me through some examples or some anecdotes or maybe even just some approaches you're using to leverage some of that data in conjunction with the partner brand to not just amplify the economic success, but actually to drive engagement amongst the members. So it's not just a once-off points purchase, but you're actually getting some more meaningful engagement out of them.
Yeah, okay, so you talked before about you're either in loyalty or you're in marketing. What is really interesting about my position is I am in marketing for a company that builds loyalty products. So I don't really know where that fits in your continuum. But what's really cool about the marketing team that I get to lead is that half of it is actually data science and analytics. The other half is actually product partner and performance marketing, as well as brand and content. So it's like a 50-person team, 25 of whom work on our data. And it's, you know, if it were just basic segmentation, then it would be pretty easy for us, for people to repeat what we do, right? You just look at your tiers, you look at your offers, and you can pretty much create a decision tree and say, okay, here you go. Anyone can replicate it, which is why we would advocate for, sure, anyone can build this themselves, but when you have as much experience as we do with a whole bunch of different regions and programs and products, you can start to get really smart about layering who you target and what you target. So be they products or be they offers or special tiers that you're trying to stretch people to, minimum purchases. So we can be really smart about that, the economies of it. But what the really interesting thing that you can see is post first purchase. And this is a rule across the board. Post first purchase, engagement in the program and engagement in the airline and hotel overall dramatically increases. When we looked at this with one of our airline partners, when you look at the number of flights and the number of other earned transactions, they go up post that first point purchase, that was tougher to say than I thought, by about 20 to 30% within the first 6 months. And when you look at that actually in the hotel space, that can 5x actually. And I'm gonna get even a little, something super interesting that we've recently found is while we do have buy elements of our program, we also have gift and transfer. So say you're the recipient of a gift from me, even though you didn't make the financial investment in investing in the program, your behavior drastically changes because someone invested in the program for you, and now you actually earn more and stay more or fly more. So it's this notion of I have decided to invest in the currency, in my favorite currency that I love, and that makes it stickier for me.
It's interesting. It's interesting. I'll tell you what's interesting, because we talked earlier, I mean, we've talked all day, and even yesterday, about the virtuous cycle of redemption, that, and we emphasized the point this morning. Getting a member, particularly a new member or a newly engaged member, to that point of first redemption is absolutely critical. And, the data is completely settled because, and you can all look at it in your programs, is that point of redemption, it is guaranteed your members are going to display a lift in post-redemption earning activity. I mean, as long as their experience is good. I mean, there are exceptions, and sometimes things go wrong and it's a disaster and the member exits the program. But I mean, that's rare. I mean, generally speaking, you get your members to that first point of redemption, they have a good experience, they think this is fun, I want to do this again, and then they get the co-brand card, and then they do other things, they have that deeper engagement. But what you said about the points purchaser also makes sense to me. Because if you've pulled your credit card out to spend money buying that currency, you're really putting your money where your mouth is, so to speak, in terms of being literally invested in that currency. You're really committed to it. So you would expect that you have an expectation of a positive experience using those points, and that you're going to continue. But the gift element, now that's interesting, because the gift recipient may not be as savvy with regard to programs or currency and all the rest of it. And I'd also think, if you had have asked me, without giving me that heads up, I would have thought maybe the recipient not only isn't so savvy, but might have just been saving for maybe one specific redemption, maybe a honeymoon or something special like that. Somebody's gifted some points to them to help with that. Yes, they'll redeem, they'll have a good experience. But what you're saying is the data shows that person then goes on to greater engagement afterwards.
Yeah, unquestionably. And what it almost is when you're talking about the redemption cycle and that pulling people in, it's almost like a cheat to kickstart that cycle, right? And so you're inserting a positive action that kickstarts that. And kind of further to that, one of the really interesting things that we do is we do exit intent surveys when someone purchases or gifts or transfers. And through COVID, one of the most fascinating things that we saw with one airline was when we asked, why did you buy currency today? Several people actually said, because I love this airline and I want to make sure they're okay through the pandemic. That is emotional loyalty, right? And that led to economics. And furthermore, what other people say to us is, I always want to have a points balance so that in case I have to travel quickly, then I have that. Or, hey, I want to give money to my family, And my mom doesn't love accepting money from me. So what I do is I give her a bunch of points. And it is just this really great way to, yet again, emotionally connect with these loyalty program members because this is part of their emotional lives.
Hands up who's worked in the brand or currently works in a brand, has a relationship with points, and has really actually engaged with them historically in terms of some of this richer data, to understand some of these engagement metrics. Okay, pretty much all the same people. Okay, yeah, I would hope so. If not, I'd say you're leaving an opportunity on the table. In my experience working with points in the past, one of the things that I think has always been valuable in whichever brand I've been representing has been benchmarking data. And it's the same when you're talking to your co-brand issuer. And obviously they're not going to tell you exactly who competitor A and competitor B and competitor C is, but knowing where you kind of stand in that league table, are we on trend? Are we underperforming in certain areas? Are we overperforming? What really stands out? One of the things that I think might be interesting to ask is, do you see a difference or are there particular insights that you think always jump out at you when you're looking at your benchmark airlines versus your benchmark hotels, for example, in terms of member engagement activity?
Yeah, well, airlines and hotels behave differently, obviously, because the redemption patterns are different and the loyalty math itself is really different. So the pricing of the currency tends to be different. So we do see not only differences in airline hotel, but we also see really big differences in type of airline. So are you a low-cost carrier? Okay. Yes, no. But further to that, what we've been able to do is say, we heard Air Canada talk earlier about we're looking at our Canadian members, our US members. What we can do, and I think this happens a lot more in the hotel space, is geographical differences of loyalty program members in the same program. So, for example, we know members in APAC, when they buy way bigger the first time. They're committed and they've just decided to buy a lot more. We know that in the Middle East, they are more likely to try something new. So smaller purchases than in APAC, but they're gonna, in their loyalty life cycle, start. So you can, depending on what you're looking for, find any data.
Sure,
Yeah.
sure. I don't know if others have had this experience as well, but I've always been pleasantly surprised by the volume of revenue that comes through. You run a point sale, and it doesn't always have to be where's Brad? Hilton is very aggressive. I have to say, the sales are very aggressive. I also just think that your branding is fantastic since you changed it a few years back, and it stands out in my inbox. So there's some feedback to give back to Jonathan's team from the work they did. But it is, and sometimes I think to myself, the sales are aggressive. I get it, but sometimes I'm curious, just what is the volume of sales there? And I've always been surprised at every brand I've worked with. It's pretty big.
Yeah.
It is, members like to buy points.
They do. And so the thing I'll also say, though, when you have those sales is you can do it with a blunt instrument, right? And you can say, I'm going to offer 100% bonus or 40% discount to a mass audience and just say, listen, I need revenue, and this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to blunt instrument hammer it. I would say that is probably not the smartest way to do it. What you really want to be able to do is look at, if I know you, I know your behavior, I know your tier status, again, not in the segmented decision tree way, but all of our models tell us, I only need to give you a 70% bonus to get you to transact. I know what your balance is. I know I can make assumptions on what you're trying to earn towards. Then basically the art in it is to try to figure out what is the minimum bonus or discount I need to give you in order to get you to buy the maximum number of points or miles. And that's where, it's a mixture of art and science comes in.
And are there, I know we're not talking about segmentation decision tree, but in terms of just post-analysis, trends, is it as simple as, our top-level elites, yes, they buy the most because they're the most engaged in the program, and then it kind of falls down to your mid-tier and your low-tier and your base members, or is it different to that?
Oh, yeah, it's not that. So we do have certain, super buying groups, and no surprise, the most valuable groups are usually high tier because they do kind of get a lot of utility out of the program. But you also you can move people up and down the value chain. So someone who may start as a needs-based purchaser and they may not even buy on promotion, you can move them up the chain. And those needs-based purchasers are usually not your highest tier. But also some of our highest tiers are like, well, I'm not going to buy because I'm earning. So I don't actually need additional points. A lot of them buy if we can convince them to gift or transfer. And so it's not just this blanket high tier most valuable. There are a whole bunch of other factors that play in, and a lot of it has to do with points balance and activity. So how frequent are your redemption patterns?
You know, I think and that makes sense to me, because I think whenever I've looked at co-brand data, for example, it's your very first timers, it's pretty low engagement because they're not committed with the brand yet. Mm-hmm. Your super, super, super high earners, I know I keep joking about your 22-year-old McKinsey consultants, they got 2 million points in their account, they don't need any more, and they have to use the corporate card anyway. But you've got a bunch in the middle, and that doesn't necessarily mean strictly they're your gold tier or whatever else, but there's people in the middle. They've engaged enough that they're hooked. Mm-hmm. They're involved with the brand. Maybe they've made their first or second redemption. They're liking it. They're accruing some more. Now they're like, "Oh, that was really cool. I want to ramp up to my next target, my next goal." But they're not earning the 2 million points from McKinsey, so they need some accelerators. So whether it's purchasing, co-brand, or otherwise, I want to bring the conversation back to how we sort of started with Plusgrade and all the rest. I know the acquisition's pretty recent past now. As we think about moving forward, and as you're thinking about from a CMO point of view, how do you see, besides the fact that they're complementary businesses and products, how do you see your product suite evolving to take advantage of, the whole being greater than the sum of the parts?
Yeah, I think the pretty easy tie-in and the thing that made it really exciting for both parts of the business was that pay with points option on your upgrade, your seat block. So that's the most kind of natural place that we're looking at. But then there are also, again, going back to that happy ancillaries place, there's some products that we're working on to be able to, on the Plusgrade side, help you to kind of have a VIP experience at the airport. And to be able to pay with all or part of that with points to earn points on top of that, I think is one of those things we're looking at. Another really interesting thing that we're doing is some jurisdictions have regulatory challenges to be able to sell points and miles. And so with one of our partners, we did develop this bundled option that includes things like lounge access, rental car, and happens to have a points bonus attached to the bundle that you buy. So that's how we managed to help one of our partners kind of get around those regulatory issues. And that, again, is one of those things where we'll be pulling the points and Plusgrade solutions together.
We have time for one quick question. Does anybody have a question for Danielle before I let her off the hook? That's awesome. For those who don't know Danielle, it's Danielle. You can see the guys have a great suite of products. If you're not working with them, or you are working with them but you haven't really explored some of the analytics capabilities, I highly recommend have a chat with them. They can do a lot more than just offer you a buy, gift, transfer platform. So thank you, Danielle.
Thank you.
We've got the next panel. Dave, it's your call. If you want to do it out here, the lav mics won't work, but we've got 3 handhelds. The bar is not open unless Arivia wants to write another check. I'm happy to do it here. Does everybody want to just stay out here for the last session?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Well, why don't we pull up 5 chairs? We'll just have to share the handhelds, if you're happy with that.